Hello everyone, and welcome to the 24th episode of the Little Thespian Podcast. Unfortunately, this is our last episode of the year, but it's going to be a great one as we have a guest that you guys have been asking for several months. You guys have wanted this guest on since the beginning, and I'm so glad I can give you guys this late Christmas present. And it's going to be a great time as we talk to an amazing director, producer, actor, and inspiring teacher. His name is Andy Cuk. So without further ado, guys, let's hop into this episode of the Little Thespian Podcast. And guys, before I go, don't forget to have a very happy new year. 2021 is your year, it's my year, it's everyone's year. So let's hop into another great year, and let's hop into the last episode of the Little Thespian Podcast of the year with Andy Cuk.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 24th episode of the Little Thespian Podcast. My name is Matthew Crandall, and today I have a guest that many of you have been asking for, a truly inspiring guest. He's a director, actor, producer, and an incredible teacher. His name, Andy Cuk. How are you, Andy?
Hi, that was so kind. What a nice introduction. I'm the 24th. Is that significant somehow that I'm the 24th?
I mean, I wanted to get eventually to 25, but the thing is like we took a break, so then it became 24. But it's good because then we hit the 25th episode when we hit the new year. So it's
there you go.
It's the way I'm looking at it.
2 dozen. It's great.
Exactly. And I cannot believe that we've done 24 episodes after this. It's been crazy almost every week. And it's been a hell of a schedule. Especially during COVID, which reminds me, guys, you guys know what to do. Wear a mask, socially distance, and wash your hands. Oh, and hand sanitizer is your best friend. Also, guys, happy holidays. During this time, hopefully 2021 is better than 2020 because it's been a weird year. But let's hop into the 24th episode of the Little Thespian Podcast.
I think weird is a bit of an understatement.
Oh, for sure. No, it's been, there's no words. It's just been, It's been very crazy, guys. And we need to do our part, even with the new strain coming out. It's, we still have a long trek, but the light's in the distance. We can see it. And hopefully we get to it soon.
Yeah, cool.
So let's hop into the first question. As with every Little Thespian podcast, the first question, Andy, is how exactly did you get into theater?
Oh my God. Wow. How did it was so long ago, Matt. I'm not sure I can remember. Most of your guests, I think, have been a little bit younger than I in the previous. Maybe that's you were building up for an age. How did I get into theater? I got in a little bit through the back door because my true love was classical music. And so as a kid, one of the things that I loved to listen to on an LP, you guys remember LPs, the things that go round and round and round, you put a needle on, was opera recordings that we had in my house. My parents weren't particularly interested in classical music per se. I had an uncle who was rather smart guy and very cultured in a traditional sense. And so he kind of brought that into the house. And I fell in love with listening to classical music. I wanted to be an opera singer, and a classical music singer. So that's a kind of theater. When I graduated from high school, I went to a conservatory of music in Ohio because I'm a native from the States, born and bred in New York City. And I spent 2 years at the conservatory, had a good and bad time, and ended up dropping out of school for about a year. In the meantime of that dropping out, I wanted to get more experience because I still wanted to be an opera singer. So I started doing musicals in my local community. My parents had moved up to Westchester County, which is just above New York City, and I moved back with them. So I was about 19. And I started going to doing like dinner theaters, and we'd do 4 shows a weekend. They pay us $10 a weekend for 4 shows. Terrible. And so I started doing musicals, and I've always loved musicals. I think part of the LPs that I had besides operas were musical theaters, LPs. And my mom, not my dad, because my dad worked nights, but my mom would take my brother and I to see couldn't see a lot of musicals, Broadway musicals, because it was very expensive, even in those days. But we did see some really classic musicals from the 60s and 70s. But my mom did take us to see a lot of theater when we were growing up. I think she kind of lived her culture through us, made it an excuse to take the kids. So we went to see not just classical music concerts, but ballet and opera, and a lot of theater. Theater was relatively affordable. So she would buy a subscription to, let's say, Circle in the Square Theater. Now, we didn't go to a lot of Broadway because that was expensive, but we went to a lot of these sort of off-Broadway houses for a season, and I got to see some amazing performances. So when I finally dropped out of school and my first school, and then started doing musicals, it was soon after that people started to ask me to do things other than musicals, and it really was a branch into Shakespeare, partly because of a trained voice and a love of language. So I basically went from classical music to opera to musical theater, kind of always was in there, to Shakespeare, to non-musical, non-Shakespeare theater. So that was my back door.
Wow. And that's what I've been saying on, like, with a lot of my guests. It's usually something sparks it out of nowhere. You know what I mean? And like, just your mom bringing you to theater kind of sparked that love.
Absolutely.
And that's crazy to me, because the same thing happened with me. I went to Stratford. I saw a Shakespeare play, and I'm like, this is it. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. You can just watch it, and then you're instantly in that world. It seems like, Yeah,
I owe a lot to my mom. She was a difficult woman, and she and I got along more or less okay. But later on in life, she actually apologized to me. My brother ended up in music. He was just retired as a music teacher, but did a lot of classical music and musicals and all sorts of things. He's a pianist, accompaniment for singers. And a few years before my mom passed away, she apologized to me that she felt that she didn't support us enough in the things that we wanted to do. And I said, oh my God, Mom, what are you kidding? You took us to Shakespeare in the Park, waited 6 hours online to get free tickets. I saw some of the best actors in the world in New York, for going to various different kinds of shows. You took us to concerts, and my brother and I ended up in the arts. How much more could you have helped us? Unless you wanted us to be lawyers, then of course you screwed it up, which I think that's kind of what she meant, but hard to know. No, you're right. You're right, Matt. You know, I do owe a huge debt of gratitude to my mom for exposing us to all sorts of different kinds of performance and a love of the arts.
And that's the thing too. Like, I find just, it might be that I was in prof and we got to go see so many amazingly different types of theater. And then getting to do Decalogue, which we will talk about, it was great to kind of just be exposed to so many different types of theater and theater history, which was incredible. And it's a good segue to talk about some of the teaching that you do. So how does it feel kind of teaching art and teaching theater to the young actors, young thespians that are coming up?
The Little Thespians.
Yes.
Well, now theater was another way that I kind of got in through the back door. You know, I was living and working in Little Rock, Arkansas, of all places, because I had taken a job with the Little Rock, the Arkansas Repertory Theater, and both as an actor and a stage manager. I alternated shows, and the season was over, and I needed a job for the summer, and I wasn't heading back to New York. I had left New York and wasn't going back, at least only to visit. And someone said to me, "Oh, there's this teaching gig for a summer program, and they need a theater teacher." And I applied, and that was my first formal teaching experience. It was like an 8-week program in the summer, with about the age of what we have for CEGEP. It was young people going into their last year of high school, so which would be like people going into their first year of CEGEP here. And you know, I fell in love with it. At first, I was scared. I had never done this. I thought, I'm doing this because I need money. But when I walked away from my very first day, actually, I was so nervous. I locked my keys in my car and had to call a locksmith and all that kind of stuff. And on the way back, I was so high from having done my first day of teaching that I realized I was racing, you know, on the highway, and I was going to get a ticket. But it was like performing to me. I had a script, you know, it's my lesson plan, and I was improvising, and I was telling a story, because that's the way I teach, to get to the fundamental of your question. I feel like teaching is telling a story, and that's kind of what theater is, right? Actors, that's what we do. Writers, that's what we do. We tell stories. Actors enact stories. Directors manipulate to enact a story, and that's I think why I love teaching so much. And then over the years, as I've taught more and more, and now it's like over 30 years since then, because that experience happened in 1989. You know, I realized that it's something that I think I was meant to do. It's not always the thing I want to do, but it is the thing that I think I was meant to do, to help young people experience a media. I love all kinds of art, by the way, but to experience a wonderful artistic medium that I've loved all my life. And I find that it's not just about entertainment. It does so many things. It stimulates us. It makes us think. It makes us cry. It makes us angry. It makes us get up and change the world if it's the right kind of show. And I love being able to impart that to, you know, young people who may or may not have the same ideas or may not have experienced, as you were saying, you know, seeing something like that you'd never seen before, thinking about art or theater in a way that you never thought about before. So that's kind of where, you know, I still love doing it 30 some odd years later. So,
and that's the thing. I feel like you get into this type of art that, like, you see life on stage, right? And you kind of put yourself into their shoes. And that's what I love about theater. It's just, you become not just a storyteller, but like a message maker, where like everything that you're saying every little thing might hit a different audience member differently. You know what I mean? And it's beautiful. I
And
find
you never know how it's going to hit either, and you don't really have control of that, you know. So
exactly.
like all art, you don't know what somebody's going to do when they look at your painting, spit on it or buy it. You know?
Actually, to talk more about teaching now, what has been like the most challenging part during this time, trying to kind of shift gears onto teaching acting on Zoom?
Well, when we first went out last spring, everything went digital, and that was weird because no more contact on campus. I pivoted. We were working on characterization anyway from scenes from a play, so I just pivoted that we would continue to work on characters as though we were doing a radio play. Just the same characters. So we pivoted that way and finished the semester doing that. This year, this past semester and next semester as well, we're kind of half on campus and we're one of the few departments that they were allowing on campus, actually. So we started with, I think most of the students have most of their courses on campus, or it's like split 60-40 or something like that. But when Montreal went into the red zone, they ended up making that less. So instead of being on campus every week for some day or another, we went every other week. So things got a little bit more online, where we might have been like 2/3 on campus, 1/3 online. And it depends on the course. For example, theater history, I taught theater history in the first years this past semester, and that was all online. Didn't really need to be. It's nice to be on campus, but it works very well online. But obviously an acting class or a movement class or even a voice class, a creation class, I mean, those we're so used to having, being present. But even when we're on campus, we have to wear masks and we have to be socially distant. So there's no contact. So no contact improv, none of those kinds of stuff. And we have to stay 2 meters apart, which is difficult, So how to pivot? We worked on different things. Everything goes a little bit slower online, and we have all these cleaning protocols. Classes have been reduced in time just because, what they've done is like, for example, first years might be in all 3 classes back to back all day on one day. Second year is on the next day, so that they don't have to come in multiple times. And so one cohort, basically from the acting side, one cohort spends the whole day in the studio, and then we just clean at night, kind of thing, disinfectant stuff at night. So things move a little bit slower. So I had to change in terms of the amount of things I wanted to do, still concentrated on the things that I had planned to do in terms of working on scenes. This semester, I'm teaching second year actors this year. And this semester would have been, getting in front of an audience as much as, if you remember, this would have been your Find Me / what did we do? Venus and Fur, right? / Chekhov semester. So we really couldn't do all of that. We started to work on a project for the end of semester, but we found that when we went to every other week on campus, we were going to live stream it from the studio. We ran out of time, so I'm actually going to do that at the beginning of next semester, sort of postponed it a little bit. We didn't get to do 10-minute plays at the end of last year, so we did the 10-minute plays and live streamed that from our computers. Works very well. There's only 2 people per scene. So we did that on Teams because school is using Microsoft Teams. I don't think I would do that again. Teams is not very conducive to that. And then we did a Chekhov scenes, all from the Seagull, and we live streamed that from Zoom. And that went fairly well, So had to pivot, to a certain degree, the actors are getting a lot of what they would have gotten had we been on campus, but certainly there are some things that are missing, in terms of having an audience that you can see and hear, as opposed to just see the names on the side and the participants list. So a little bit different, but some of the same lessons are there, and some we just have to find a way to pick up later, in their time with us.
Yeah, and it's true because it's almost like a hybrid of theater and film in one, I find. But it must be different, but also very eye-opening still over Zoom because you can kind of see exactly what you're doing too um, over it. So it's probably beneficial in itself too, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. It's a kind of hybrid approach. Like we're going to be doing a live stream production next semester. I'm going to be doing it with the third years, and we're planning on a live stream from the Casgrain. But some of the techniques are not live theater techniques. Like they don't have to project because we have no audience. So they'll be microphoned or boom mic'd or something like that. So some of the techniques are filmic and some are live. It's kind of like doing old school live television. That's kind of the way we're thinking of it. We'll have, a couple of cameras or 3 cameras or whatever. And a lot of the direction will be switching between cameras as we try to do this. We'll tape it, but we'll also try to do a number of live streamed performances so that the students get a chance to really, that's not just doing a film, right? Because a film you can retake and then you put it all together in editing. This is still a live show. You can't edit in the middle of it because you're live streaming it. So it's going to be interesting. And I agree with you, Matt. For a certain degree, as much as I would rather be doing the way we had been doing, I like doing that. I like having live people. I like being in front of real people as opposed to my screen. Not that you're not real, Matt, but you're over there real.
Yeah.
But I'm actually kind of having a little bit of fun. I'm learning all these new things, technology that I didn't really know. I probably know, because school uses Teams, I was asked at school, I was one of the teachers that was volunteered to use Zoom because they had the whole like kind of different interfaces with Zoom and stuff. And so learning all the different platforms and oh boy, when you do this, it doesn't work or it does work. And how does it work if you try X, Y, or Z? Or what happens if you share? Is there too much of a lag? And actually, it's kind of fun. I mean, it's time consuming, but I actually find it kind of fun. I like technology, so it didn't scare me too much. A little bit.
And that's the thing too. Like just learning, I find it's great just to learn something new, and especially during this time, it's the perfect time to do so because we have the time to, right?
Right. Well, yeah, if you do.
If you do, exactly.
But yeah, learning a language, learning how to play an instrument, all those kinds of things. I mean, one of the things we have found, and not just me, but the college has found, is that all this learning online is a lot harder on students. Doing this for 9 hours in a row would drive your brain nutty. Because you're actually looking at yourself too, which is weird. And, it's like you're constantly on unless you turn your camera off. So we've learned that things take a little bit slower. We can't teach in the same way. Well, you can teach in the same way, but you might not be as effective. One of the things that I learned doing theater history and from taking the school's been really good about giving us sort of, workshops and there's all sorts of things going on constantly to help us transition to this form of teaching. To find out, like, you can't just talk for 2 hours and expect anybody to stay awake in this environment. So, the techniques of mixing things up, you talk for 20, 30 minutes and you throw a video in for 10 minutes, you talk for another 20 minutes, you do a breakout, group session, put people in different rooms online, which you can do in Zoom and you can do in Teams. And it's really kind of interesting. And I found, I'm not sure I want to go back to strict, 2.5 hour lecture again. It's more fun this way. It's more engaging. So there's lots of things that I think I've learned. I hope the students have learned something from all this.
I'm sure they have. And actually, to go into what the students would be doing during this time, we were doing Find Me during this time. So I want to talk about Find Me 1.0 and how that came to be and how it shifted into Find Me 2.0 on Fringe. So what exactly was your kind of I guess, way to jump into Find Me 1.0. Why did you pick Find Me? A lot of people wanted to know that.
Oh, really? A lot of people want to know. Well,
Yeah.
damn it, I'm not going to tell them. It's me being a jokester. Not that I ever make jokes. You know, I love reading plays, first of all. I just love to read plays. You know, like people, I read novels too, and I read nonfiction, but I just love to read plays. And so I'm constantly reading over a period of a year, some years more than others, depending on how much time I have, what my schedule is like, constantly reading plays. And when I'm reading plays, I'm looking for several things. As a teacher, I'm always looking for plays with large casts that are more ensemble oriented rather than an individual character that is the main lead and everybody else holds a spear. And so ensemble oriented kinds of shows. I must admit, just for my own personal politics, I'm always looking for shows by female authors or non-traditional authors as well. So it could be a trans author or something along those lines. So I'm constantly trying to look up for, to be honest, to just try not to read just dead white men stuff, or even just live white men stuff. Nothing wrong with being a live white male, and I read your plays too. But so I'm constantly looking for something that might also have an educational value, not just mere entertainment. So that's a lot of things to find in one play. So I read plays because I hear about them, or I read about them, or somebody tells me about them, and then I go online and see if I can find it for free first. Then I usually go to my various libraries that I try. I live right near the National Theater School, and I have a membership to their library, and that's a great resource. It's one of the best play libraries I've ever seen. And chances are they're going to have it, especially if it's Canadian. One of the other things I look for is perhaps a Canadian playwright as well, so that I'm not just doing American plays or even British plays, although I like British plays. And I came across, how did I come across Find Me? I think I read about, it was a play that they use if you take your A-levels English, and they've been using it for years and years and years. So anybody who ever took their A-levels, it's advanced English in the British school system, had to read Find Me. And I went, wow, I didn't like a play. They even make you read a play. I'm totally blown away. So I found a copy of it, probably at the National Theater School. And I thought, wow, this is perfect. It can be done with 8 people, but you can expand it. I liked the nature of it. The author, God, now her name went right out of my head.
Owen Weimark, I think. Owen
Weimark. Yes, thank you. Owen Weimark. She was an American actually, and had been living in England for years and years, and wrote this play there, and it became very popular. I liked it because she also said you can, don't ever have anybody play the same role like throughout the whole play. Wanted to break it up. I thought, oh, this is perfect for me. And I also thought the message, based on sort of a failure of the mental health system in England in the 1970s, also resonated today. I mean, we don't really treat our our people who have issues in mental health, that well. Look at the pandemic, for God's sakes. How mental health has really gone by the wayside. Although I think people are picking up the slack with it. So I thought it was a really good play for, a young group. Everybody could do lots of different things. And so that's why I chose it. It seemed like a perfect fit for the third semester project, where we don't need a lot of production value. You can do it in black clothes, and, luckily people like Peter Vatsis will always volunteer to make a flat or two for us and do a little bit of lighting. And so it seemed actually, I was really happy to find it because it seemed like a real perfect fit, for what I needed.
And then Find Me 2.0, we kind of got both of the things, because we kind of mushed them together, if that makes any sense, where we had the same set potentially, but a smaller cast, and I find that both of them were just incredible. I look back on it very fondly because we kind of had these two. Just looking back at Find Me Now, I kind of think to myself, I'm like, that's a play that I would love to just keep on doing because it's so poignant now, and we don't know how long it's going to be poignant for, but like the message, like you were saying, is so important.
It would work in this kind of environment too, to do it digitally.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could definitely figure out a way to make it work with like a Zoom production. You have to get the rights to it, of course. Yeah. I wanted to do a fringe thing. It had been a long time since my company had done a fringe show and a long time since I did a show, period, with my own theater company. So, I approached the school. I thought, this might be a good project. And we had done it, a teacher had done this before where they took a project that people had done at school and then did it for the fringe. So I applied and got a spot, and school agreed to do like a co-pro. Basically, I put up all the money and school gives me gives me the space and the set and all that kind of stuff, which was a totally good deal. And then to see how many students would want to or able to do it in the I didn't expect everybody would be able. And then we also had Victoria, who's doing her own show, and I didn't want to screw up her show. So it ended up being 8 of us. With one person who wasn't in the original, Molly, who wasn't in the original group. So yeah, it became quite a different show. I think most of you probably didn't even do the same scenes, the same roles, maybe a little bit here and there, but because it had to be redistributed and changed because we were in a fringe situation as opposed to school. So it didn't do like the pre-show thing, not easy to do at the fringe. Given the nature of how things work there, but yeah, I agree. I thought it went. I thought it went pretty well. I thought you guys did a really nice job with it. It was, a nice show. I think it worked in both settings.
And that's the thing too. I love the fringe because it's so inclusive, where you can kind of just put it up, no matter like where you're at, like you can be a student and do it. And you can just see that with Vic. She continues to
Yeah, good for her.
Exactly. Good for her.
Especially nowadays, but even before the pandemic, I mean, if you sit waiting for stardom to find you, you might sit for a long time. What's nice about what Victoria's doing and what a lot of people are doing is going off and making their own opportunities. It doesn't mean you can't audition and, hope for some big role or small role in one of the big theaters or a film or gaming, filming and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean you can't hope for that and try out for those kinds of things, but you don't use it, you lose it. So it's best to, make your own opportunities. So it's great. We have lots of former students who go out and start their own companies and keep trying to work, doing different things. Sometimes they morph into doing other things, writing or producing or those kinds of things. But that's how it has to be. You have to make your own opportunities and be ready for when the outside opportunities come knocking.
And to actually go right off of that, how was taking the opportunity and doing your own show at Abbott, the Decalogue Project? We need to talk about Decalogue for a bit.
Well, it's not the first show I did at school, and certainly I've done shows on my own theater company outside of school. But Decalogue it had been a few years. Let's see, the last show I did was maybe 6 years before that. Was it 6? Yeah, it was 6 years before that. And it was based on Macbeth. It was called Three Witches. And it was with the two groups before you. And that was more of, every time I've done, so that would have been Decalogue was my third show at school. And each one I did a little bit differently. They were all devised projects of ascent that we didn't start with a script, but some were a little bit more, like, for example, the first one I did was based on the Electra myths, the Greek Electra myths. And, we looked at various different plays from the time period and kind of mixed and meshed them together. And I wrote stuff for it and around it, based out of our rehearsals, but it was more of a mishmash in a sense. The second one, Three Witches, we played around in rehearsal, but it was more like the rehearsals where I would go home and then be inspired by what we did in rehearsal and wrote a script and then bring it back and we'd play with it. Decalogue was a little bit different in two ways. I really wanted to do a devised piece where more of what we did in rehearsal actually showed up on stage, not merely as a stimulus of creativity, but as a direct inclusion in the play. The other thing about Decalogue that I really wanted to do, I've been wanting to do a very abstract piece for a long time, and it kind of chickened out every time a little bit. So I really pushed myself to do something that was highly abstract and taking in, I always liked the visuals anyway, sound and visuals, but taking the sound and visuals and really upping the ante on it. So that's where Decalogue came out of. I probably had been thinking or working on the piece for about 6 or 7, maybe 8 or 9 years prior to that. I got the idea of doing something based on, using the 10 Commandments as a jumping off point, and had been mulling that for quite a while. So that's how Decalogue came about. I wanted to do something really abstract, or as abstract as I could, as well as do something where the work we were doing in rehearsal really did come and show very clearly in the work that we performed. So that was the case. I think a lot of things that you guys did in rehearsals and playing around ended up on stage in terms of scenes and words and things like that. And a lot didn't too. That there was a lot of sort of playing around. I also wanted to do something that was messy. And Decalogue was definitely messy with all the paint and water and sand. And
I still don't know how they scrub that every performance out of our costumes.
Yeah, they weren't exactly too pleased with me. I'm sure.
But an amazing production, and I'm not just saying that because I was a part of it, but it really was. I still hear fond memories of it.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was fun. I loved doing it, and it came out looking beautifully, and you guys, really jumped with it, and, because it was, as audience interaction, all those kinds of things. You took a leap of faith and you went with me. It was really nice.
And also in the round, we don't usually get to play in the round anymore, but it was so great to actually do that as well. And play on paper. Who gets to say they get to play on paper?
There's been a few out there, that have done things on using paper or on paper. It just was such a great video projection surface too. So, and you get to play around with it. You get to paint on it and draw on it and rip it up and all. It's not my first play on paper. I was an actor in a play, not on paper, but they used paper as a set. It was more hanging, and then we cut things up and manipulated them up and threw water at it and almost everything except burning it, which would have been not good.
So I actually have 2 more questions for you, and then unfortunately we got to end this off, but I could do this for hours,
good.
Days. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what does the future look for Andy moving forward now after COVID?
Well, the future, I don't live that far in the future. I'm working on next semester. We're going to doing the second year project that we should have done this semester. We're going to finish it and present it around week 7 of the semester. So around then. And then for the second part, we're going back to our original, this semester was actually all classes lasted all 15 weeks. We didn't have the traditional break with classes in production. But next semester we're going back to that. And then I'm taking the third years and I am writing a new piece for them that we will live stream from the Cow's Grain. It is, the structure is based on a late 19th century play called La Ronde, or Reigen in German, by a guy named Arthur Schnitzler. It's an interesting structure. A lot of people have done fun adaptations of the play or rewrites of the play. And it's going to be about the pandemic because we have to wear masks. Why hide that we're wearing masks? So that's what I'm working on right now. And that's the sort of the two things that are happening for next term. Beyond that, I haven't really, I mean, I have thought about shows for my group when they get into their third year. At that point, we don't know if we're going to be back with audience, back on the stage, still wearing masks, you know, when we're talking about fall of 2021. So kind of everything is a little bit up in the air. But I haven't really thought much past that, to be honest. Just need to, you know, get through this time. And, you know, I actually want to spend more time writing, and that's always been a hard thing to find time to do when I'm teaching full time. So hence why I do shows at school. So it forces me to write something.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to that because that's another Andy Cuk production, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And the last question, because we haven't really talked much about acting with you in acting. So I want to ask you, is there a role that you would love to go back and play again?
Wow. I would love, it's not so much the role. I did a real crazy version of Hamlet with a theater troupe when I was living in Santa Barbara, California. We actually toured it to various parts of the world. And when I moved here, the company brought the show to the Montreal Fringe, and we did it at the Fringe. This would have been 2003, and won the Best of Fringe award. And then we brought it back and did it at the Wildside Festival at the Centaur that in January 2004. Subsequently, I did it again I think that we went to Europe after that. So then we did it in Europe. They did it in China, but I wasn't invited because I live so far away now. But I would love to do that again. I think that was such a great and interesting production of Hamlet. I mean, the role of Hamlet's always something you can go back to. But yeah, I mean, that would be a show that I would love to do again as an actor. You know, there are shows I'd like to do again as a director, but you know, that's a whole nother thing.
I would love to hear about that, though. as a side note, what would be one that you would want to jump back into?
As a director?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of plays that I did at school that I would love to do, like with professionals, just to see. Because I mean, not that the students did badly or anything, not at all, but just would be, I would like to explore it without having to be a teacher on top of it. Things like Welcome to Thebes by Maura Buffini. He's a British playwright, beautiful adaptation of a bunch of different Greek myths, mostly Antigone, but really beautiful play, poetic play, yet set in modern times. Brutal play in many ways. I'd love to do that. I'm such a big fan of Arcadia. I always wanted to redirect Arcadia, but you know, I have to wait a few years to do that. But I would also like to go back and do Not Wanted on the Voyage, which is one of the first plays I did at Abbott by it's a Canadian writer whose name just escaped me. It's based on his novella, Not Wanted on the Voyage. Beautiful, weird, and it's like a Noah's Ark. It's all about Noah's Ark, but not very friendly to Noah and to religion. But it was a really cool production. Lots of animals. I like doing things that have animals in it. So yeah, there's a couple that I'd like to go back and revisit.
Sounds great, and I have a lot of I just put some notes because I want to read those.
You won't find Not Wanted anywhere published. So if you want to read it, you'll have to ask me to send you a copy, a PDF of it.
Will do. And unfortunately, guys, that ends this episode of the Little Thespian Podcast. But before we do end this off, I always shine a light on our guests. And my God, what a great guest to have on to end this off. Thank you, Andy, for being on. As always, so inspirational. And it's so great to catch up with you during this time. I'm glad you're doing well. And I cannot wait to see what the future holds for Andy Cuk.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure. I feel honored that you asked me.
Thank you for being on. And I'm so glad that many people have asked you to come on, because I definitely wanted you on this podcast. And it's been great having you on. There's only one way to end off this episode with Andy Cuk, and that's with his saying, which everyone knows. Any questions, comments, cutting remarks. So if you guys have those, you can put them down below. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you all next year.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays. Bye, Andy.
Bye.
The lights are off. The curtain has fallen. And it's time to say goodbye. Thank you all for joining us on the Little Thespian Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to ask, either down below or on any of our platforms. Unfortunately, that was the last episode of the Little Thespian Podcast for the year, guys. But we hope you all have enjoyed this episode and all the episodes that have come out during this crazy time we like to call 2020. But there's more stuff coming in 2021, some new things, some new equipment, and so much more. Soon to see exactly what that is. We're also going to have some amazing guests joining us, and I truly cannot wait to start off the new year with some amazing guests and amazing new videos coming your way. Thank you guys for showing the amazing support you guys continue to give us. In 2020, it was incredible, and I am truly grateful. I can't even express into words how grateful I am for you guys this year. If you guys want some more support, however, don't forget to like this video, to comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe to us here on YouTube. It helps us out tremendously, guys. Also, don't forget to ring the bell to be notified on all future videos. Guys, there is no words to express how thankful I am that you guys have made this year that much better by showing me so much support on this podcast. And so we can have some amazing guests like Andy Cuk. Thank you so much, Andy, for being on. It was, again, an honor to just have you in our presence and to inspire us once more. So this has been your host, Matthew Crandall, telling you guys to always shine bright, to always look on the bright side, even if 2020 is a nightmare. Don't forget to shine bright, guys. Have a very happy new year. And we'll see you all next year on the Little Thespian Podcast.